It was supposed to be easy, just fixing an old car.
We're activating it. That's all we're here for. It's not a warning, it's a signal.
They're watching.
It's not a machine, it's a creature. If it gets out, it's all gone.
The asteroid loomed ahead, a jagged mass of dark stone veined with faint, crystalline streaks that glimmered faintly against the starlight. Daniel Reeves stood at the viewport of the Horizon Breaker, staring at the asteroid's desolate surface. He had seen plenty of alien relics in his time, but nothing like this. The star engine buried within was a relic of unimaginable age and complexity, technology far beyond anything humanity or any other known species had ever achieved. And like everything that old, it was broken. He adjusted his tool belt as the ship's autopilot guided them closer to the asteroid's docking bay. The star engine had been discovered centuries ago, and countless teams had come and gone, each certain they could restore it. None had succeeded. Theories abounded. It was too advanced, too damaged, or simply misunderstood. Some even whispered that the engine was never meant to be repaired. Reeve wasn't interested in theories. He was here to solve a problem. "Docking complete," called Vasquez, the team's pilot, her voice calm but tense. "We're in. Airlocks holding steady." Reeve nodded and turned to the rest of his team. There were 6 of them: engineers, technicians, and researchers. All experienced, all hand-picked. They had studied the blueprints, deciphered fragments of ancient text, and rehearsed the mission a dozen times. Yet now, as they prepared to disembark, an unease settled over the group like a cold mist. "Everyone knows the plan," Reeve said, his voice steady. "We stick to protocol, no improvising, no heroics. Let's get to work." The airlock hissed open, and the team descended into the asteroid's docking bay. The interior was vast and cavernous, its walls lined with alien metal that seemed to drink in the light from their headlamps. The air smelled faintly metallic, with a sharp undercurrent of something organic, like wet earth or decaying leaves. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the hum of their equipment and the crunch of their boots on the uneven floor. The excavation site was already prepared. Centuries of work by other teams had unearthed the star engine, exposing its massive, intricate form. It was unlike anything Reeve had ever seen, a sprawling structure of crystalline spires and interlocking plates, each piece humming with faint energy. It looked less like a machine and more like the skeleton of some immense, long-dead creature. Strange symbols etched into its surface glowed faintly, pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm. Reeve approached the engine, his breath catching as he studied its intricate design. "Look at this," he murmured, gesturing to the crystalline core. "It's still alive, barely." "Alive?" Vasquez asked, her brow furrowing. "Figure of speech," Reeve replied. But even as he said it, he couldn't shake the feeling that the engine was more than just a machine. It seemed to radiate a faint warmth, like the dying embers of a fire. The team worked methodically, setting up equipment and running diagnostics. The engine systems were fragmented but not entirely inert. As Reeve analyzed its power grid, he began to see patterns in the chaos, fractures that could be repaired, connections that could be restored. He felt a surge of excitement. This might actually work. Hours turned into days as the team toiled in the engine's shadow. Reeve became consumed by the project, his mind racing with possibilities. He barely slept, poring over schematics and adjusting delicate components with painstaking precision. The engine seemed to respond to their efforts, its faint pulses growing stronger, its crystalline structures shimmering with renewed light. Then, on the 12th day, it happened. Reeve was deep within the engine's core, recalibrating a power relay, when a low, resonant hum filled the chamber. It started as a faint vibration, almost imperceptible, but quickly grew into a deep, rhythmic tone that seemed to resonate in his bones. The engine was coming to life. "Reeve," Vasquez's voice crackled over the calm, urgent and sharp. "We're picking up something." A signal. Reeve climbed out of the core and joined the others at the monitoring station. The signal was unmistakable, a powerful transmission emanating directly from the engine. It was a strange, layered sound, a cascade of tones that seemed to shift and blend in ways that defied comprehension. The team's translators worked furiously to decode it, piecing together fragments of ancient text. "Do not wake it," one of the technicians read aloud, his voice trembling. "Do not wake it." The warning repeated in dozens of languages, some long extinct, others unrecognizable. Reeve frowned, his analytical mind rejecting the notion of superstition. "It's just a fail-safe," he said, trying to reassure the others. "Some kind of automated message to scare off scavengers." But even as he said it, he felt a chill run down his spine. The signal wasn't just a warning, it was a beacon. The rhythmic pulses from the engine grew stronger, reverberating through the asteroid. For a moment, Reeve thought he heard something beyond the hum of machinery. A faint, guttural sound, like a distant roar. Then the vibrations stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. The engine's light dimmed and the signal faded. The asteroid seemed to hold its breath as if waiting. Reeve exhaled slowly, shaking off the tension. "All right," he said, forcing a smile. "Let's take a break. We'll analyze the data and—" "Reeve," Vasquez interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to see this." She pointed to the monitors. Reeve's stomach sank as he saw the data streaming across the screen. The signal had propagated, broadcasting far beyond the asteroid, its reach extending across star systems. And something had responded. Far beyond the asteroid, on the edge of their sensors, a cluster of ships was moving toward them. Their signatures were unlike anything in the galactic database, sleek, massive vessels that emitted no detectable energy. They moved with an eerie, deliberate grace, like predators stalking unseen prey. The team stared at the screen in silence, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. "What are they?" someone asked. Reeve shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted. "But they heard us." The horizon breaker floated silently near the asteroid, its lights a faint glow in the endless void. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted from nervous excitement to something colder, heavier. The signal from the star engine still echoed faintly through their instruments, a reminder of what they had unleashed. But it was the ships that consumed their thoughts now. Reeve leaned over Vasquez's shoulder, his eyes locked on the monitor displaying the alien vessels. There were 5 of them, their silhouettes darker than the void itself, absorbing every trace of light that touched them. They seemed impossibly sleek, as though carved from a single seamless piece of obsidian. Even from this distance, their presence was oppressive, like the gaze of a predator that had already marked its kill. "They're not broadcasting any ID or comm signatures," Vasquez said, her voice tense. "No energy readings either. It's like they're dead, but moving." "That's impossible," Reeve muttered. "Everything leaves a trail, heat, motion, something. There's no such thing as perfect stealth." "And yet here they are," Vasquez shot back, her tone edged with fear. The team gathered around the console, their faces pale in the cold light of the display. The ships were still at the edge of the system, motionless, watching. Reeve could feel their presence even through the screen. It wasn't just paranoia. The vessels exuded something almost palpable, a sense of intent that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "What do we do?" asked Myra, one of the technicians. Her voice wavered, betraying the thin veneer of calm she was trying to maintain. Reeve hesitated, his mind racing. They had protocols for alien encounters, but nothing like this. No one knew who these ships belonged to or what they wanted. "We stick to the plan," he said finally, though his confidence felt hollow. "Finish the diagnostics. Pack up and leave. If they get closer, we'll try to open a comm channel. Maybe they're just curious." He didn't believe it, and neither did anyone else. Hours passed, but the ships didn't move. The team returned to their work, though the tension in the air was suffocating. Every sound, a clatter of tools, the hum of equipment, seemed too loud, as though it might draw the ships closer. Reeve buried himself in the engine, trying to ignore the unease gnawing at the edges of his mind. The crystalline structures glowed faintly under his hands, their pulse growing steadier, stronger. The repairs were working, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the engine wasn't just responding to his touch. It was aware of it. Then, without warning, the ships moved. Vasquez's voice crackled through the comms, sharp and panicked. "Reeve, they're coming. Fast!" Reeve scrambled out of the engine's core and raced to the monitoring station. The alien vessels were accelerating, their dark shapes slicing through the void with unnerving precision. Their trajectory was clear. They were heading straight for the asteroid. "Distance," Reeve barked. 30,000 kilometers and closing," Vasquez replied. "At this rate, they'll be here in 10 minutes." Reeve's mind raced. They were out of time. "Start the engines," he ordered. "We're leaving." "Wait," Myra said, her voice trembling. "We can't just run. What if they're hostile? What if they... If we stay here, we'll find out," Reeve snapped, "and I'm not willing to risk it." The horizon breaker powered up, its thrusters humming to life. But as the ship began to maneuver away from the asteroid, the lights inside flickered and dimmed. Alarms blared, and the control panels went dark. "What the hell is happening?" Reeve shouted. "It's the engine," Vasquez said, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's interfering with our systems." "That's not possible," Reeve said, though he knew it was. The engine's power output had been climbing steadily, and now it was broadcasting some kind of electromagnetic field. The asteroid trembled beneath their feet, as though responding to the engine's awakening. The alien ships closed the distance with terrifying speed. Reeves stared at the screen, his stomach churning. Up close, the vessels were even more imposing. Their surfaces writhed faintly, as though alive, and the air around them seemed to shimmer with a dark haze. They didn't open fire, didn't attempt to communicate. They simply hovered, surrounding the asteroid like predators circling prey. "What do they want?" Myra whispered. Reeve didn't answer. He didn't know. All he knew was that they were trapped. The horizon breaker was crippled. The asteroid's excavation site was shaking itself apart, and the alien vessels showed no signs of leaving. The team was running out of options. Then something changed. The star engine's pulse grew stronger, deeper, resonating through the asteroid like a drumbeat. The crystalline structures began to expand, their glowing veins writhing like living tissue. Reeve felt the vibrations through his boots, up his spine, into his skull. It was as though the engine was alive, and it was waking up. The alien ships responded immediately. Their dark forms converged, their movements unnervingly synchronized. Beams of faint black energy lanced from their hulls, striking the asteroid with pinpoint precision. The beams didn't explode or burn. Instead, they seemed to dissolve whatever they touched, reducing stone and metal to nothingness. The asteroid groaned under the assault, chunks of its surface crumbling away into the void. "We need to shut it down," Reeve said, his voice tight. "The engine, it's what they're after. If we stop it, maybe they'll leave." "Are you insane?" Vasquez snapped. "We've come too far. We don't have a choice," Reeve shouted. "If we don't shut it down, we're dead." He didn't wait for her to argue. He grabbed his tools and ran toward the engine's core, the vibrations growing stronger with every step. The crystalline spires glowed blindingly bright now, their structures shifting and twisting like living things. Reeve reached the control panel and began frantically inputting commands, trying to override the system. But the engine resisted him. The controls were sluggish, unresponsive, as though the machine itself was fighting back. Reeve gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his face as he worked. The alien ships continued their assault, their beams slicing deeper into the asteroid. The walls of the excavation site groaned, cracks spidering across the surface. Then the engine roared. A pulse of raw energy exploded outward, knocking Reeve off his feet. The sound was deafening, a deep, primal howl that seemed to echo through the fabric of space itself. The alien ships halted, their beams cutting off abruptly. For a moment, there was silence. Then the creatures began to arrive. The silence after the engine's roar was almost more terrifying than the noise itself. The asteroid trembled beneath the team's feet, the vibrations coursing through the walls like the dying breaths of some immense, unseen beast. Reeve lay sprawled near the engine's core, his ears ringing and his vision swimming from the blast of energy. He forced himself upright, his hands trembling as he gripped the control panel for support. Around him, the engine pulsed with a violent, irregular rhythm. The crystalline structures had warped further, their once clean geometric lines now twisting into jagged, organic shapes. They throbbed with a sickly, shifting light that played tricks on the eye, as if the colors themselves defied comprehension. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burning metal, but beneath it was something else, a faint, putrid odor, wet and organic, like decaying flesh. "Reeve, can you hear me?" Vasquez's voice crackled over the comm. She sounded panicked, barely holding it together. "I'm here," Reeve said, his voice hoarse. "Status?" "The ships are holding position, but something's happening on the asteroid. The surface. God, it's moving, like it's alive." Reeve didn't have time to process her words before a guttural, low-frequency growl rumbled through the excavation site. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't a malfunction. It was a sound born of something living, something vast and ancient, and it filled Reeve with a primal, instinctive terror. The team's comm channel erupted with overlapping voices as the others began to report what they were seeing. Myra, stationed near the edge of the excavation site, was screaming incoherently about shadows moving in the dark. Another technician, Gant, shouted something about the walls, breathing. "Stay calm," Reeve barked, though his own voice was shaking. "Regroup at the central chamber. Now." The others acknowledged, but their voices were fractured by panic. Reeve turned his attention back to the engine. The controls were no longer responding. Every attempt to shut it down was met with resistance, an error message flashing in alien script that his translator refused to interpret. The machine's pulse was growing faster, more erratic, as though it was feeding on something, gaining strength. He had to get out of there. As he turned to leave, he froze. A shadow moved across the crystalline structures, its shape wrong, too fluid, too fragmented. It slithered between the spires, folding and unfolding in ways that made Reeve's stomach churn. For a moment he thought it was a trick of the light, but then it stopped and turned toward him. It had no face, no eyes, but he knew it was looking at him. The thing emerged from the shadows, its body shifting as it moved. It was impossibly tall, its form a grotesque amalgamation of sinewy, translucent flesh and jagged chitinous protrusions that scraped against the walls. Its limbs were too long, bending at unnatural angles, and its surface shimmered with a wet, iridescent sheen. As it moved closer, Reeve saw that parts of its body seemed to flicker in and out of existence, like an image struggling to fully form. Reeve backed away, his breath hitching in his throat. The creature's presence was overwhelming. It radiated a deep, primal wrongness that he could feel in his bones, as though its very existence violated the laws of nature. When it moved, the air itself seemed to ripple, distorting everything around it. The creature paused, tilting its head, or what might have been its head, toward the engine. Its jagged appendages twitched and the engine responded, its pulse quickening in time with the creature's movements. Reeve realized with dawning horror that the two were connected. The engine wasn't just a machine, it was a part of this thing, a fragment of its existence that had been trapped and now reunited. "Reeve, where are you?" Vasquez's voice cut through his paralysis. "We're at the central chamber." Myra's hurt. "Gant? He's..." Her voice cut off with a choked sob. Reeve tore his eyes away from the creature and bolted for the central chamber. The corridors of the asteroid were different now. The walls, once smooth and metallic, had transformed into something organic. Pulsating veins of bioluminescent light ran through them, and the surfaces felt soft and spongy underfoot. The air was damp, filled with a faint, rhythmic squelching sound, as though the asteroid itself was alive and breathing. He rounded a corner and nearly tripped over Gant's body. The technician was sprawled across the floor, his torso split open in a grotesque display. His ribs had been pried apart, but instead of blood and viscera, there was something else. Black, fibrous tendrils writhed within the cavity, spreading outward like roots searching for purchase. His face was frozen in an expression of utter agony, his eyes wide and unseeing. Reeve gagged but forced himself to keep moving. He reached the central chamber to find Vasquez and Myra huddled together, their faces pale and streaked with sweat. Myra clutched her arm, blood seeping through her fingers from a deep gash, but her eyes were wide and distant, staring at nothing. "What happened?" Reeve demanded. Vasquez shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "It came out of nowhere. Gant tried to..." She broke off, her gaze flicking to the corridor behind Reeve. Reeve turned, and his heart stopped. The creature was there, standing at the edge of the chamber. Its body seemed larger now, its form more defined. Black tendrils coiled and uncoiled around its limbs, and its translucent flesh revealed glimpses of something moving inside, shapes that should not have existed, twisting and writhing in ways that defied logic. "We need to go," Reeve said, his voice shaking. "Now." "Where?" Vasquez snapped. "The ship's dead. The asteroid's falling apart. We're trapped." Reeve didn't have an answer. The creature stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate, as though savoring their fear. Its presence filled the chamber, the air growing thick and heavy. Reeve's mind raced, searching for a solution, but all he could think about was the engine, the machine that had started this nightmare. The creature let out a low, guttural sound that reverberated through the walls, its jagged limbs twitching in anticipation. Reeve clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. If the engine had released it, then maybe the engine could contain it. He just had to survive long enough to figure out how. The asteroid was tearing itself apart. The walls pulsed and twisted, veins of glowing light rupturing to spill an ichorous substance that dripped in slow, deliberate streams. The air reeked of ozone and decay, an oppressive miasma that clawed at the back of the throat. The tremors had become constant, shuddering through the asteroid's core with a dreadful, rhythmic cadence, like a heartbeat growing faster, louder, as though something immense and terrible was preparing to emerge. Reeve stood in the control chamber of the star engine, sweat dripping down his face, his breaths shallow and ragged. The engine loomed before him, its once beautiful crystalline spires now grotesque and alien, writhing like living things. It wasn't just a machine anymore. It had become something else entirely, an extension of the creature, a vessel for its power. He could feel its presence pressing against his mind, probing, twisting, searching for cracks in his resolve. Behind him, Vasquez's voice cracked over the comm. "Reeve, it's here. It's in the main corridor. We can't hold it off." Reeve gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. "Keep moving. I'll finish this." "You don't have time," Vasquez snapped. "We need to get out of here." "There's no way out," Reeve said, his voice low, steady. He could hear the creature's guttural roars through the calm, faint but unmistakable. It was coming for them, its hunger palpable, an all-consuming void that would not stop until there was nothing left. "If we don't stop it here, it'll spread. You know that." A pause, heavy with silence and despair. Then Vasquez spoke, her voice trembling but resolute. "What are you going to do?" Reeve stared at the pulsating engine, his mind racing. The solution was clear, even if it felt impossible. The engine was the key. It had always been the key. If it had been designed to imprison the creature once, it could do so again. But not in its current state. It was too far gone, its systems corrupted, its energy unstable. To trap the creature, he would have to push the engine beyond its limits, force it into a catastrophic collapse. The resulting singularity would consume the engine, the asteroid, the creature, and him. He didn't let himself think about it too long. There was no time for hesitation, no room for doubt. Reeve began to work, his hands moving with mechanical precision as he overrode safety protocols and rerouted power to the core. The controls fought him at every step, sparks flying as the system buckled under the strain. But he pushed through. He couldn't afford to fail. Not now. "Reeve," Vasquez said, her voice breaking, "there has to be another way." "There isn't," he said quietly. "Get to the escape pods, take Myra and go. Don't look back." "We can't just leave you." "Go, Vasquez," Reeve said, his tone firm. "That's an order." For a moment there was only silence. Then Vasquez's voice came through, soft and full of anguish. "Good luck, Reeve." The calm went dead. Reeve exhaled shakily, his focus narrowing to the task before him. The engine groaned and shuddered as its power levels climbed, the crystalline structures cracking and splintering under the strain. The vibrations in the air grew sharper, more chaotic, as the engine's pulse synchronized with the creature's. It was close now. He could feel it, a vast, malevolent presence pressing in from all sides. Then it appeared. The creature slithered into the chamber, its grotesque form filling the space. It was larger now, more solid, its jagged limbs scraping against the walls as it moved. Its translucent flesh shimmered with an unholy light, revealing glimpses of the horrors writhing within. It let out a deep, guttural roar that seemed to shake the very foundation of the asteroid, its countless eyes locking onto Reeve. For a moment, he froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Then he forced himself to move. He activated the final sequence, his fingers flying over the controls as the engine's core began to overload. Alarms blared, the chamber bathed in a blinding, pulsating light. The creature screeched, its limbs flailing as it sensed the trap closing around it. It surged forward, faster than anything so massive should have been able to move. Reeve braced himself, his hand hovering over the final command. The creature loomed over him, its jagged appendages lashing out, but he didn't flinch. He slammed his fist down on the control panel, and the engine roared to life. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. The core imploded, collapsing in on itself with a deafening, otherworldly scream. The crystalline structures shattered, their shards suspended in midair as the singularity began to form. The chamber warped and twisted, reality itself bending as the gravitational pull intensified. The creature let out a final, anguished roar, its body disintegrating as it was dragged into the singularity. Reeve felt the pull too, the force tearing at his body, his mind, his very being. But he didn't resist. He closed his eyes, a faint smile on his lips. He had done it. He had stopped it. The singularity consumed the asteroid, the star engine, and the creature, collapsing into a pinprick of light before winking out of existence. Far away in the escape pod, Vasquez watched in silence as the asteroid disappeared, leaving nothing but an empty void where it had once been. Myra sat beside her, clutching her injured arm, her eyes hollow with grief. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say. Reeve was gone, but as the pod drifted through the vast expanse of space, Vasquez felt a flicker of something amidst the sorrow. Hope. Reeve's sacrifice had not been in vain. The creature was gone, its threat extinguished. The galaxy was safe, at least for now. She leaned back in her seat, staring out at the endless stars. Somewhere, in the vast, uncharted darkness, other horrors might be waiting. But for now, there was silence. And for now, that was enough.